change. Now, you can talk about Vision 2030 and Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, which looks at critical sectors like energy being part of the immediate discussion. And this is for this reason we have in studio Chisola Nyala. He's a renewable energy consultant and joins in the studio. Good to have you.
Good morning. Good to have you.
Right. Now, if you may, you've seen the president on the Copper Belt. That is a big issue. Obviously, that talks about the energy sector being part of the mix. What's your comment?
Yeah, I think it's quite a very interesting and very important subject to talk about, because as far as the industry is concerned, you really want to have a stable energy mix to ensure sustainability of the process or the business in general. So I think it's quite very good news to see that we have such development going on, but it's also a challenge to us to think of ways how do we come up with sustainable energy sources.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's get straight to your interest in this matter of the energy mix. I want to believe that the situation was not as dire as it is now when you decided that your interest is in this area. More than ever, people like yourselves are in focus. There's a lot of attention on you. This pressure, what is it making you to have to do?
Yeah, it's just like you said, I think it has never been like this before in terms of the energy crisis. It calls for us to start thinking outside the box. Just to mention, we do understand that the energy mix in terms of the landscape in Zambia is about 80% hydropower, which basically, when you look at that, it's a good argument to say it's a clean energy source, but it begs the question of sustainability. So when we talk about renewables as the energy option at this moment, I think there's never been a better time than now to actually make sure in terms of pushing the agenda. So there's a lot of pressure in terms of trying to come up with solutions. This actually cuts across both residential and commercial solutions. So it's actually, what I would say is, we are pressured to think of how do we actually tend to integrate the energy mix, because that's the only solution that we have, which is trying to integrate the energy mix, which simply means trying to have multiple energy sources in the mix in case of unreliability on one or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's so many options, and there's so many levels at which you can discuss this. You can discuss this at a very high level, but the majority may not be in that bracket.
Yeah.
And there's talk about solar. You can talk about all these other sources.
Yeah.
But there are costs that are related to all these things, especially startup costs, if you're going to talk about solar. For the ordinary person, what options are there?
It's actually sad to say that we're in a situation where people have actually been forced to start thinking of different options in terms of energy reliability. But what also people need to understand is that, of course, there's actually huge upfront cost, or the initial capital cost, as you said, in terms of solar. I think it's really solar and wind energy, which have potential in the country, but I think the talk is mostly solar. It's also something to note that there's what we call a threshold period when your capital actually breaks even with how much energy you're generating. So it's actually a long-term plan. So you're going to have a huge capital cost, but then there's a time after the cost when your energy becomes essentially free. So I think people need to actually think about that, and also they need to embrace the current situation with the net metering situation in the country. I think it plays out in advantage to the community. I really want to commend, I think, ZESCO for that initiative, because what that simply means is that if you do a good job in the design or the system that you put across, you're unlikely to pay any bills, because what will happen is that you'll be exchanging the power that you're actually generating when you have excess, and when you do not have, you tend to actually get back the power from the grid. So I think the only viable solution is solar at the moment. And with time, we've seen that there's an advancement in technology, which simply means that we can only expect that the cost will be going down with time. And yeah, of course, it's an argument to say, because when you look at the tariffs themselves, the electricity tariffs from ZESCO, I think we're talking about, is it 44 ngwe per kilowatt hour? That's quite cheap. But then when you go on the market, I think a 545 watts solar PV module goes about 3,000 kwacha, which is roughly about 5.5 kwacha per watt, which works out to be about 3 kwacha per kilowatt hour. So when you do the comparison, 44 ngwe against 3 kwacha, that's a huge margin.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then what we're trying to actually educate the public is that the upfront cost can actually be quite high, but in the long run, you actually save on the electricity bills. And there's a moment, I think, where you tend to actually have free energy. And I think it plays well with the net metering.
Right. It's a concept that has to be explained further, and I know that the efforts to make it understandable for the majority. And it's also well known that now ZESCO is feeling the pressure of importing excess power at the current tariffs, which just not sustainable. Yesterday, I was talking to other experts on the platform, and they indicated to me that over 50% of the energy that is consumed is through cooking. That a lot of it has to do with cooking. That if you really quantify and collect the usage, it is almost what is consumed at an industrial level. So because it is cooking, the immediate pressure goes to now charcoal, trees being cut. What do you do? What options do you give to the public? Because this has everything to do with cooking.
It's so cooking, rather heating, is actually the biggest
heating,
chunk.
yes, let's put it more general.
Biggest chunk when it comes to energy consumption. So what we actually see on the market is that when we give some of these solar solutions, we tend to actually even omit the cooking, because then the system becomes very, very expensive. But then what we advise as well is the use of actually maybe gas, just to take off the pressure. And it's also interesting to see that there's quite a number of companies that are coming up with, clean energy sources in terms of cooking. We're talking about clean stoves. I think that's the option that we really have at the moment, just to ensure that we do not we preserve the environment from using charcoal. So I think those are some of the options that are there that I would actually say to the public.
Smart metering works in other countries. What's the advantage if we can get there?
So the advantage with smart metering is that so you see, when you look at the population of the country, there's quite a lot of residentials. So if people are able to generate their own power, which simply means that mostly during the day, when you've got excess power, let's say from solar, they're able to actually contribute to the grid. And when you add the masses, there's quite a huge amount of energy that comes from there. So what that does is that it actually reduces the stress on the national grid, because then there's excess power. So the viability of the model is that instead of having so much stress on the grid, then you're going to have so many independent producers, called prosumers, which in the long run actually gives companies like ZESCO the pressure to only focus on the industry. So I think it's a very viable model. But then the only question we have at the moment is actually the integrity of the grid. And two aspects to that is that one of them is the capacity of the grid. How much is the grid willing to accept in terms of power that is generated from the public? Then the other one is actually the compatibility of the grid itself with the technology. How compatible is the grid right now to actually integrate these renewable technologies into the system? And that's why I think at the moment ZESCO has rolled out a plan to upgrade the meters. So that's one of the things that I think is happening in the background to just make sure that there's compatibility between the grid as well as the integration of the energy mix.
As I let you go, the final thought regarding the immediate solution, which seems to be solar, but what would you be suggesting about staggered payments on the part of those that are retailing in this product, seeing that not many may afford a one-time, one-off payment, and yet that's where the immediate solution is.
Yeah, so I think that's so unfortunate to say, and I think. As government organizations, I think we do have a responsibility to come up with financial solutions. I think that's the only way we can actually help the community. Try to think of soft payments that can be put in place so that people can have access to electricity. I think so many companies around that do have the potential to actually be able to help. I think it's just the core that I would say to actually see to it as it's a community giveaway in terms of trying to just relieve the pressure on the community.
Well, what can I say? Thanks for your time. We're talking to many people regarding this. It's a really trying time, but thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you so much.